Your phone rings. An unknown number flashes on the glowing screen. Your heart skips a beat. You do not just sit there, you immediately stand up. You start pacing the room like a caged animal. Left. Right, turning sharply at the wall. Your breathing turns shallow. Your stomach tightens into a hard knot. You stare down at the vibrating device in your hand. You let it ring. You feel entirely ridiculous. Why can you not just sit still and press a simple green button? Why do you have to walk back and forth across your living room just to say a basic hello to a stranger? You judge yourself harshly in this exact moment. You think this makes you pathetic. You think this means you possess a fragile and broken mind. You label yourself as a coward suffering from severe telephobia. You assume your social skills are completely defective. You believe your brain is humiliatingly malfunctioning under the microscopic pressure of a mundane daily interaction. Stop. That is a brutal lie you have been feeding yourself for years. You are not experiencing a pathetic psychological breakdown. This frantic pacing is absolutely not a useless nervous tic. The sudden sweat on your palms is not a shameful sign of introverted weakness. You are actually witnessing a spectacularly brilliant biological override. Your body is forcefully intervening to save your cognitive system from a catastrophic total collapse. Your eyes dart frantically around the empty room. Your feet hit the wooden floorboards in a strict rhythmic pattern. You are moving because your brain is quite literally starving for neurological bandwidth. Consider the reality of human communication. When you speak face-to-face with someone, your brain relies heavily on visual data. You subconsciously read their microfacial expressions. You monitor the subtle movements of their hands. You calculate the shifting angles of their posture. This continuous visual feedback provides a massive emotional safety net for your nervous system. But on a sudden phone call, that vital safety net is violently ripped away without warning. You are suddenly socially blinded. You are forced to decode complex human intentions using absolutely nothing but a compressed, disembodied voice echoing through a tiny speaker. This sensory deprivation causes an immediate and massive spike in your internal cognitive load. Your prefrontal cortex is suddenly overwhelmed by the missing data. Your amygdala instantly detects this processing failure as a severe threat. So what does your intelligent nervous system do? It forcefully hijacks your muscles and commands you to move. It initiates a motor routine to offload the crushing mental burden. The repetitive rhythm of your pacing footsteps helps your brain synchronize overloaded neural pathways. It is a desperately calculated biological strategy to keep your fragile consciousness focused. You are physically walking to keep your mind from shattering under the invisible psychological weight of that unknown caller. You think you look foolish pacing in circles? Science calls this neural synchronization. And the truth behind this supposedly awkward habit is actually a breathtaking masterpiece of human evolution. You think you pace endlessly across your room because you are inherently anxious? You assume you are fundamentally restless, lacking basic discipline, or simply unable to handle standard adult communication? Modern society constantly conditions you to stand completely still, to project unwavering confidence, and to rigidly ground your physical body. The best-selling books on effective communication strictly advise you to maintain a solid, unmoving posture to exude absolute emotional control. But this is exactly what modern self-help gurus have completely lied to you about. Forcing yourself to artificially project that perfectly smooth social exterior during a moment of intense internal panic is literal neurological poison. In 2018, Cognitive neuroscientists at Stanford University analyzed the precise relationship between repetitive physical movement and acute mental processing. They discovered something entirely paradoxical. Forcing your body to remain perfectly still during a sudden spike of sensory deprivation actually triggers a massive secondary stress response. Let us observe your brain like an isolated biological machine under a clinical microscope. When you take that unexpected phone call, your working memory is instantly overwhelmed by a terrifying void. You are frantically attempting to process tone, pitch, and implied meaning without a single accompanying visual cue to guide your interpretation. This creates a severe, immediate cognitive bottleneck within your fragile neural pathways. To compensate for this sudden and unnatural sensory deficit, your amygdala immediately floods your bloodstream with a concentrated surge of cortisol. Your sympathetic nervous system violently prepares your entire body for an invisible physical attack. From the outside, you look like a pathetic, nervous wreck, wandering aimlessly around your coffee table in a state of absurd panic. But from the inside, your biological architecture is executing a flawless, life-saving marvel of engineering. The physical act of pacing acts as a crucial, sacred neurological pressure release valve. By aggressively engaging your motor cortex through repetitive, rhythmic physical movement, your brain literally diverts the excess, volatile electrical energy away from your overwhelmed emotional centers. This is the ultimate controlled variable of your daily survival. If you were talking to this exact same person face to face in a quiet room, your body would remain completely calm and collected because the necessary visual data is readily present. The variable in this equation is not your pathetic lack of confidence or your broken social skills. The variable is the profoundly unnatural mechanism of the telephone itself. Every single step you take across that room is your nervous system aggressively demanding vital equilibrium. It is mechanically forcing oxygenated blood flow back into your prefrontal cortex so you can successfully articulate your next sentence without helplessly stuttering. Not a single healthy brain on this planet is evolutionarily designed to process complex, disembodied voices while remaining rigidly frozen in place like a lifeless marble statue. It is absolutely inevitable that your physical body will fiercely rebel against this unnatural, forced stillness. You are not a defective, socially awkward communicator chronically failing to maintain your composure. You are a highly sophisticated, beautifully complex organism actively preventing a complete cognitive short circuit. Why does a brain capable of processing complex quantum physics completely short circuit over a simple digital ringtone? Let us forcefully pull the camera back exactly 200 million years. We are no longer looking at human social anxiety. We are looking at the foundational blueprint of mammalian ecology. Picture the very first nocturnal mammals scurrying beneath the dense canopy of a primordial jungle. In that dark and brutal environment, survival depended entirely on a hyper-vigilant auditory radar system. A sudden acoustic intrusion in the pitch black was never a friendly greeting. High-frequency sounds meant an apex predator was actively hunting you. Your specific genetic ancestors were the highly paranoid creatures who instantly froze, flooded their muscular system with adrenaline, and prepared to sprint for their lives the exact millisecond an unseen twig snapped. That ancient mammalian software was never uninstalled. It is permanently hardwired into the deepest and most inaccessible architecture of your central auditory processing system. Now bring that 200 million-year-old biological hardware into your heavily illuminated modern apartment. Your smartphone is a brilliant technological marvel, but to your primitive mammalian brain, It is a persistent and terrifying anomaly. The sudden piercing vibration of an incoming digital call is the exact biological equivalent of a predator howling directly behind your neck. Your conscious logical mind clearly knows it is just your boss or a random telemarketer. But your amygdala is a traumatized prehistoric bodyguard that fundamentally does not care about modern corporate etiquette. It only cares about keeping you physically alive against invisible acoustic threats. It violently hijacks your motor cortex without asking for your permission. It mercilessly pumps cortisol through your bloodstream. It screams at you to move and frantically flee the immediate area. You are fundamentally running a 200-million-year-old survival operating system inside an aggressively unnatural digital world. But this visceral physical reaction is only the surface layer. What your brain is actively calculating behind the scenes during that phone call is infinitely more spectacular. Let us examine the absolute biological impossibility of a modern digital voice. For hundreds of millions of years, mammalian communication strictly required close physical proximity. You saw the breathing of the other creature. You felt their immediate thermal energy. You meticulously assessed their shifting physical posture. In 2021, bioacoustics researchers at the Max Planck Institute demonstrated that the mammalian nervous system requires complex multisensory feedback to establish biological safety, specifically relying on visual confirmation to validate auditory input. When you answer an unannounced phone call from an unknown number, you are aggressively violating every single foundational rule of mammalian acoustic communication. You are interacting with a disembodied and heavily compressed audio frequency, completely severed from a physical breathing body. To your primitive sensory processing centers, a disembodied voice is a terrifying biological impossibility. It is an evolutionary ghost. It is a phantom threat, bypassing your visual radar and directly assaulting your auditory cortex. Every single time you pace frantically across the wooden floorboards, every single time your stomach drops violently at the sound of a random digital notification, every single time you stare blankly at a ringing screen and absolutely refuse to answer, you are not failing at basic human interaction. You are not exhibiting a shameful and defective psychological disorder. You are witnessing a profound masterclass in biological self-preservation. Your nervous system is meticulously shielding your vulnerable cognitive centers from severe digital sensory shock. When you are forced into an unpredictable verbal exchange without any visual confirmation, your brain feels exactly like a solitary prey animal drinking at a hidden watering hole surrounded by incredibly tall and rustling grass. It knows an invisible entity is communicating with it, but it cannot visually confirm the danger level. Therefore, it strictly commands your legs to keep moving. The rapid pacing across your room is a brilliant and necessary substitute for the primal flight response. It is a flawless physiological compromise. Your rational prefrontal cortex forces you to politely stay on the line, but your terrified amygdala forces your legs to walk so you do not completely shut down from the overwhelming cognitive load. This is not a pathetic glitch in your social personality. This is a highly calculated and magnificent evolutionary feature. Society violently demands absolute physical composure during every single digital interaction. You are constantly told by modern corporate culture and self-help influencers that true confidence requires total physical stillness. You are expected to sit perfectly upright in your ergonomic chair, to keep your hands calmly folded, and to project an unwavering aura of smooth professionalism regardless of the psychological pressure you are experiencing. You deeply internalize this toxic expectation. So when the phone rings, you attempt to force your body into that unnatural mold. You force yourself to sit perfectly still. You swallow your rising panic. You grip the edge of the desk. You desperately try to project absolute professional calmness. You ignore the suffocating lump in your throat, and you pretend you are entirely comfortable being digitally interrogated by a disembodied voice, while your internal alarm systems are literally burning down. Circuit broken. System overrides. You walk. This sudden physical rebellion is not a shameful loss of self-control. It is your vagus nerve aggressively severing the toxic expectation of social perfection. From a purely neurological standpoint, forcing a frightened mammal to remain completely motionless while it feels hunted is the ultimate form of psychological torture. When you demand perfect stillness from your overwhelmed brain, you are essentially forcing your fragile nervous system to wear a heavy, lead-lined spacesuit while drowning in a chaotic ocean of invisible digital frequencies. Your amygdala refuses to let you suffocate inside that heavy suit of fake composure. The moment you stand up and begin to frantically pace across the floorboards, you are successfully tearing off that suffocating helmet. You are choosing biological survival over an artificial aesthetic of calmness. Your restless feet are generating the exact physical friction required to keep your humanity intact. This beautiful disconnection from physical stillness is the ultimate price of psychological self-defense. Every time you turn sharply at the wall, your motor cortex is effectively pulling down heavy steel blast doors to protect your core identity from the invisible radiation of modern anxiety. You punish yourself for not being a smooth, robotic communicator who never breaks a sweat. But that robotic smoothness is a complete illusion created by an industrialized society that wants to optimize your productivity at the expense of your sanity. The people you admire for their flawless composure on the phone are often the ones internally burning out the fastest. Their nervous systems are quietly collapsing under the crushing weight of that suppressed adrenaline. You, however, are allowing the pressure to safely escape. You are honoring the primal boundaries of your own mind. All of the brutal intensity of 300,000 years of evolution, all of the frantic electrical signals desperately firing across your synapses, all of the terrifying neurochemical floods, ultimately collapse into a singular moment of profound biological grace. It is perfectly captured in the quiet rhythm of your pacing feet, the gradual slowing of your racing heart, and the magnificent realization that you are fundamentally safe. You have spent your entire adult life apologizing for your sensitive nervous system. You have brutally punished yourself for every single drop of anxious sweat. You have hated your own legs for relentlessly pacing across the living room carpet. You genuinely believed you were simply broken and fundamentally incapable of normal human interaction. The precise neurobiological reality paints an entirely different and profoundly beautiful picture. Your sensitive brain is absolutely not your enemy. It is a highly traumatized and fiercely dedicated biological bodyguard. It has endured 50 millennia of strict tribal conditioning since the dawn of the cognitive revolution. In the brutal reality of early human caves, being physically separated from the group meant absolute and certain death. Seeing the immediate facial expressions of your peers was the only biological guarantee that you were not being quietly exiled. Your central nervous system still rigidly runs this 50,000-year-old social software today. It continuously sacrifices your temporary digital grace to absolutely guarantee your ongoing tribal inclusion. It willingly makes you look foolish in your modern apartment just to keep your primitive survival instincts intact. That frantic pacing is the physical manifestation of profound biological loyalty. It is the distinct sound of an ancient survival machine desperately trying to save you from the terrifying isolation of a disembodied voice. It actively absorbs the crushing weight of modern digital disconnection, so your mind remains whole. You cannot ever reprogram a 50,000-year-old tribal architecture. You cannot force your vagus nerve to suddenly enjoy modern auditory deprivation. You can only change how you treat yourself after the dreaded phone call finally ends. You must quietly grieve the toxic illusion of the perfectly smooth, modern communicator. You must finally accept the beautifully flawed reality of your human neurobiology. Your nervous system is constantly fighting invisible social battles that nobody else will ever fully see. The sheer amount of cognitive energy required to answer a blind phone call is staggering. You are surviving an unnatural environment that was never built for your ancient tribal brain. The next time an unknown number flashes on your glowing screen, the next time you find yourself pacing relentlessly across your quiet room, do not insult the very biological mechanism that is actively keeping you alive today. Do not force yourself to sit perfectly still and silently swallow the rising panic. Let your anxious feet hit the wooden floorboards in their natural rhythmic sequence. Allow your exhausted nervous system to fully process the invisible digital shock. Acknowledge the immense effort it takes to simply navigate this modern world. You are incredibly brave in the smallest and most uncelebrated daily moments of your life. Your body has never once betrayed your existence. It is standing watch. Forgive it.